What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to the Cutlass Board Games channel, and we're once again talking about Cutlass, the living card game that I've been working on for some time. There is a whole bunch of gameplay of the game and also like learn to plays and stuff like that on the channel, but this video in particular is talking about a specific set of card updates for the latest version. And basically the purpose is that if you're a person that's interested in TCG kind of type game design, then seeing what's changed and why I've chosen to make these changes is kind of important. It does teach us a little bit about the design philosophy of the game and why things are intended to work the way that they do. So let's get into it. There's only 5 changes this time around. If you saw the last one, there's a couple of updates done recently, which is really only a week ago. And because I'm now, again, kind of playtesting is casually playing weekly, I'm like, okay, what needs to be changed? What doesn't need to be changed? Did we play with stuff? Did it not work? Is there stuff that's still being left alone? Normally is how I do stuff. This week is slightly different because I'm encouraging a new emerging archetype, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But let's start off with Herazaya. So Herazaya is a sea monster. Your sea monster is a little bit like your commander if you're familiar with EDH, but also it's kind of your big haymaker. It's the thing that you slam down to activate all of your stuff, potentially an additional time, turn. All of them have gain treasure written on it, but also they have another extra effect that's supposed to be very strong. Herazaya in particular does what Fel's Sea Maiden used to do. So Fel's Sea Maiden currently is draw 1 card, banish 1 card from your opponent's deck. And we tried it out where Fel's Sea Maiden was draw 2 cards, banish 2 cards, and a lot of different combinations of those two things. And anytime that it wasn't draw 1 card, banish 1 card, anytime it was more than that, it was broken. So we're like, okay, draw 2 cards, banish 2 cards is probably good enough for Herazaya if it's really strong, on like a more standard card. To fit into the banish archetype and kind of the killer and rule, which is like the structures control sort of shell. And it doesn't quite fit perfectly within that identity because there's a few different options here. There's pure control, where you are trying to get stuff like Cliff's Prison, you're trying to get stuff like Spire of Exile, and a whole bunch of control structures that will help you slow your opponent down and for you to catch up before banishing your opponent's entire deck. And you're still kind of trying to hit Clear and Rule with those cards. And Herazaya Claiming a Treasure is still a card removed from your opponent's deck. So it's kind of like Banish 3. Now the change, and why I think this is interesting, is that there's another archetype in mono structures that this doesn't work very well with. Which is Structures Ramp. So the 2 core cards is Wizard's Colonnade, which you reveal top card of your deck. If it's a structure, you get to add it to your tableau face down. And it has the Clear and Rule text on it as well to be able to do that ramp effect. And also Clear and Forge, which removes development time, or you can put a structure on top of your deck. So these 2 combo really nicely to build up your tableau really fast and potentially have lots of uniquely named Clear and structures. Now that's the inspiration for the new design. The text reads, draw a card. Your opponent banishes the top 2 cards of their deck. Repeat this effect for every 3 uniquely named structures in your tableau. So it's always going to be draw 2 cards, banish 4 cards if you have 3, which is a little bit stronger than the original Herazaya. But when you hit 6, then it's draw 3, banish 6. When you hit 9, it's draw 4, banish 8. And also Claiming a Treasure after the first one. Which is so much more of a haymaker. And it puts it in line with a lot more of the other sea monsters. New Arbish from the last update, where we're putting up to 5 guys in play for free, is really good. And Herazaya just drawing 2 cards and banishing 2 cards is fine, and it will continue to kind of do that. But the goal is that if you are really far into the game, she's more of a haymaker. Like, the longer you can delay as a control deck, the more payoff Herazaya becomes. And I think that's the kind of gameplay that we're trying to bring in, like really encouraged for that control archetype. And so I think this works well to solve that particular problem. And it also, makes ramp more of a viable archetype in modern structures compared to control. So that's why we're trying this out. And this is one where the maths might get adjusted a little bit. It might be just Banish's top card and it just like scales really quickly. But we'll see. If it's broken, we'll change it back, we'll adjust. That's the whole point of why we're doing kind of regular patch notes and talking about the changes and then going on playing with the changes. And you at home can be playing with yourself as well. This game is free to download and make a print and play from our Discord. So anyway, let's go on to the next one. The next one is Tuboltimus the Scorned. Now, this is one that when I made it, I was like, this is going to be really hard to word where it isn't super misinterpretable or broken. And so the original text is, if you have 4 cards named Tuboltimus in your banish pile, at the start of your construction step, draw until you have 2 cards in hand. And then when you play it and activate it, the activate effect is banish this card, draw 2 cards. So it can put itself in the banish pile and it always is kind of trying to draw your cards. Now, some context about the steps of the game. At the beginning of your construction step, if Tuboltimus is drawing you 2 cards, there's a pretty good chance that you'll have none to start with. You'll draw 2, have 2 in hand, and then you're probably discarding them also anyway. And then in your draw step, you're going to be drawing 3 or 4 cards, whether or not, because if you have no cards in hand, you draw 3. If your opponent has more treasures, you'll be drawing all 4. And so the idea is that Tuboltimus solve the problem of you starting your turn with no cards in hand. And that really only works if your tableau has nothing that says draw a card in it. And then drawing 2 cards just meant that you could have stuff to do in your construction step, like ticking down construction time from something like Scarchain Dreadbeard, or removing damage from things. And to that effect, I think it's fine, but it's a lot of investment to get all 4 of them into the banish pile to also not get that much of a payoff. And so that's why we're trying this new version. The new version is, if you have 4 cards named Tuboltimus in your banish pile, at the start of your construction step, draw until you have 4 cards in hand, then skip your draw step. And then it has the same activated effect of banish this card, draw 2 cards. So what's different here? At the start of your construction step, you will draw until you have 4 cards in hand, and then in your draw step, you will not be drawing any cards. So if you get rid of all 4 of your cards in the construction step, or you don't draw any in your construction step, you'll be going into your main phase with no cards in hand, and you'll have no actions and then have to pass, which is not great. That will often lose you the game, but like, just don't make that same mistake 5-head and you should be fine. However, this is part of an enabling set of cards that is going to encourage, and not a new archetype, an old archetype that we killed. And when we get to the end of the 5th card, I'll explain a little bit more of that in detail. But these next 3 cards, and then also this one included, are going to be kind of building the spine of that archetype. Now I'll go through and explain in a bit more detail later, but let's move on to the next one for now. So next one is the Tide Skipper. This was a reactionary change to the Tyler update in the last patch notes. In the last patch notes, Tyler's effect got split in half. So she turns cards face up, and then they get a bunch of damage put on them. And then Banquet Halls, as structure, removes damage from things, which was the second half of Tyler's old effect. Now, what this problem meant was, now that the remove damage counters effect was no longer on a crewmate, that the pirate crewmate deck no longer had access to the ability to remove damage counters from things in their tableau. Using something like Tyler, which was previously a tech card, is now more of a combo enabler, which is fine. Because now we have the Tide Skipper. Now, the Tide Skipper currently, discard a crewmate from her hand and activate its effect, is a little janky, because how it was intended to work was the Tide Skipper was the thing activating the effect of the crewmate. So if we discarded something like Tuboltimus, then the Tide Skipper would get banished and you would draw 2 cards. If you discarded something like Remnants of Scarshank, where it says discard this card from your tableau, draw a card, the Tide Skipper is the thing that gets discarded, and it's really negative value. But also, it basically says discard a card, I have an effect, which is also relatively negative. And so it was kind of underchosen. The only times it was really played was in a structures deck that needed to play a lot of crewmates, and you could play 1 or 2 Tide Skipper, so that you could have the clear and rule of the 3 structures in play, but still have access to crewmate abilities. Which I think is fine. I think it's a fine use case, and we have not removed that from the Tide Skipper's use case. But here's the new Tide Skipper text. Discard a crewmate from your hand or tableau, and activate its effect from the discard pile. So this is a bit more specific. That card that you discarded is the thing that activates. However, the Tide Skipper is the thing that sends orders still, and anything that specifies the interactions that that card would take is what that card does. So for example, Remnant of Scarshank, which would be discarded to draw a card. That card is already in the discard pile, so that doesn't care. You would just be drawing a card. With Tabortimus, you discard the Tabortimus, she banishes herself from the discard pile, and then you draw the 2 cards, which is much better. Most other cards that don't refer to its own position in the game, it doesn't matter, nothing changes. Right? So it's not a huge deal. But for those kind of corner cases where you're like, well, I don't want to be discarding the Tide Skipper as a cost of this effect, that's kind of better. The other thing is discarding a crewmate from your tableau. Now, this is really, really good. You might not think to yourself. Basically, the mainstay of the game is you're building out an engine, you're trying to get a big tableau. We have ramp decks that are trying to get as fast as possible, get as many cards into your tableau as possible. But what if we wanted to just have a small tableau? One of the things that is interesting about the Tide Skipper is that you can discard a crewmate, and there is one crewmate in particular that makes this work really nicely, which is Scourge the Unkillable, because Scourge can be played from the discard pile as if it was in your hand. So on your turn, regardless of whatever you have in your hand, as long as you have 1 card that you can discard, you use the Tide Skipper. It eats the Scourge to activate its effect, so you will have Scourge in your discard pile, and then you can always be playing Scourge in your main phase to be able to trigger the red cards in your tableau, which means that you'll always have something going on. And there's other cards that you will potentially want to discard, because if you have something that says Claim the Treasure, but it has 6 damage counters on it, you would rather discard that card and activate its effect to gain the treasure. It's gone, but it's not stuck there, potentially being eaten by a Leviathan. So you get +1 activation, and then it's kind of gone. And I think that is a fine use case for solving the problem of I have a lot of pirates with damage counters on, because the aggro pirate deck that's playing Tide Skipper is like, I don't care, I just want treasures. I don't care about my tableau, I'm just playing cards that say collect treasure. I think this works for that just fine. It basically unlocks one of the cards for a turn and does its job. But then let's go on to the next card. The next card is Outskirts Watchtower. Now, we literally just changed this card in the last patch notes. It was search your deck for a Void faction card and put it into your hand. And then we added Void's Apex, choose any 2 cards instead. And then I looked at that and I go, this is good. I'm going to change it. And then the next card that we'll see will explain why this was changed. But we'll see that in a second, shall we? The new text for the Outskirts Watchtower is Hive. In my slide, I have an error. It has the event symbol. It is still actually a structure. The text reads, if this card was sent orders from a crewmate, choose an event in your banished pile and activate its effect. So this is similar to how the Tide Skipper functions, where the Tide Skipper makes that object be the thing that activates. But then the resolution of an event puts it into the banished pile, so it won't actually move anywhere, which is fine. But it means that you can recycle events, potentially, use their effect more than once. But it needs to be sent orders from a crewmate, and only a blue crewmate can activate a blue structure. But as a second part of the text, and this is what happens when it is turned face up and if it receives orders from anything that would activate it, and that is, reveal the top card of your deck. If it doesn't match a faction in your tableau, put it into your hand. So that's Sorta, Sort of similar to the original use case. My apologies. Sort of similar to the original use case where it's finding void faction cards. But it can also find red cards. If you have a bunch of red cards in your deck, you have no red cards in the tableau. So for example, if you're playing red events, Outskirts Watchtower, you can put those into your hand as well. There is an existing archetype called Blue Crew, where you've got Stonegate before Oblivion, which has the If This Was Sent orders from a crewmate, and Seaside Barracks, which also has If This Was Sent orders from a crewmate, where you play out a couple of those at the beginning of a tableau, and then you're playing stuff like Augmenter, Felseer Maiden, Rift Sealers, the blue crewmates, to then activate those extra effects of those blue structures. And then this card is trying to encourage that as well. But it also enables another archetype. And we'll get to our last card, and then we'll talk all about that. Our last card is Merchant Markets. So Merchant Markets has this kind of been a troublesome card right from the very beginning. Originally, this was a structure that would change the order of your tableau, and we realized that that was broken, so that was changed. It then became an event card that has done a whole bunch of different things, and then currently it says send orders to one structure in your tableau, which was changed from just straight up activated. Sending orders is a lot less good, because if something has received orders and activated, it can only activate once per phase. So if you're already activating your tableau, Merchant Markets is not good. But then it has a second line of text, which is abilities in your tableau activate this turn as if you had 3 or more structures with unique names. So the trick you could do there is with Wizard's Colonnade, which requires 3 to start adding structures to your tableau face down. You use Merchant Markets, and you could be on the first turn or the second turn, really, be potentially activating that and getting stuff in a little bit quicker. It wasn't really good. I tried it out in a couple of decks that like really want Clear and Rule happening, and it just really wasn't hitting. And like usually what happens is I'm deck building, I'm looking at options, looking at things like, oh, something's just being left, it's not good enough, it's being forgotten, it's being left aside. This was not it. This was getting put in decks and it just wasn't performing. So I'm like, okay, perhaps this is not a thing that's really needed. Or it's not consistent enough, or it doesn't present something unique enough or new enough to really go, okay, we need this. So it's being changed. Now you may recognize some of the text on this. It says, search your deck for a void faction card and put it into your hand. If you have a sea monster in your tableau, choose any faction card instead. Now, this is basically what Watchtower does, but on an event. And why this is special and different, well, first of all, the Watchtower effect no longer exists. But there is a void event called Void Sign at Midnight, which if your sea monster is in the discard pile or banished, you can add it to your tableau face down with 6 development time. And that is basically a tutor from those 2 piles. Well, what if your sea monster is in your deck and you need to be playing it now? Well, Merchant Markets can potentially be the thing that's doing that. When I already have my sea monster, well, I'm just going to search for anything instead. Now, this is mediocre and kind of intentionally for most decks. Now, here's the big reveal, and the thing that I've been alluding to throughout this whole video is there is an archetype where you just play mostly event cards. You don't actually build out your tableau. You just play a ton of event cards. And let's travel back in time for a little bit, because there's an older version of this game where there was 2 broken cards. The first card was Observatory, which is just removed completely. It's now Scry the Stars. And what Observatory would do is you would reveal cards from the top of your deck, and so you had 2 that were the same faction, I think it was, and then you put them all in your hand. So you would draw minimum 2 cards. But if you went Void, which is black border, and then Pirate, which is red border, and then Kalira, which is blue border, and then like one of any of those things, you could be drawing 4 cards. So you were drawing somewhere between 2 and 4 cards every turn, which is like really good. And the Pirate event Skeletal Salvage, which is now search your deck for 2 crewmates and discard them, was return up to 3 crewmates or events from your discard pile to your hand, which basically says draw 3, and even if you're discarding a card to make the construction point to pay for the event to play Skeletal Salvage, you're still +2 cards. and it was an insane value engine that you didn't actually need to build that much of a tableau. But there was no real payoff that was designed to work for that thing because it was kind of not intended. And so now I'm trying to design a way to play small tableau and the big event deck by making cards that encourage it. And let's look back on a few things that we had, right? We have Tuboltimus that lets you draw 4 cards in your construction step instead of right before your main phase. Because if you have the 4 cards in your hand in your construction step, you can play a bunch of events, which is actually really good and is a huge enabler for that archetype. And there's a couple of events that are going to help you get Tuboltimus into the banish pile. We've got Skeletor Salvage now, which searches your deck for 2 crewmates and discards them. Well, if she's in the discard pile, she's easier to banish. Because we have another event called King's Edict, where you can banish any 2 cards from any discard pile. And you can banish the Tubalt. So 2 played, gets you 2 banished. And if you play those full 4 events, then all of them, and you'll be drawing 4 cards, which is not bad. Like, that's a pretty easy commitment, especially when Rift Sealers exists, and Rift Sealers can search for exactly which one you need. And so that's the start. That's one card that goes nicely into that set. We then also have the Tide Skipper, where you can be discarding the crewmates instead of necessarily adding them to your tableau. And depending on how good your card advantage is, that's going to work fine. But it also means that, like I said before, you can be playing Scourge every turn instead of needing to draw something that's not an event. A big problem that the event deck has is that if you go to your main phase and you don't have a thing that's not an event, you can't really do anything, and it's kind of bad. However, if you have Skirt in the bin, you discard any event, you're always playing Skirt and you're kind of safe. Which is like a thing that I wanted to have, because one of the main goals of Cutlass is to never have a turn where you say, I do nothing, pass. Which happens all the time in Magic the Gathering and happens all the time in Pokemon TCG. And honestly, I fucking hate it so much. I came here to play a game. I did not come here to spectate my opponent play a game. And that was my number one goal with Cutlass, that you're always doing something is always going on. I never have moments where I have nothing happening and I'm just spectating. And we've definitely accomplished that, but I don't want to accidentally design something that has that problem. And so Tide Skipper sort of solves that one problem. But then there's the one other thing where we have in the Outskirts Watchtower, it literally plays events. And if you're playing 100 events, then it's going to be playing an event every turn. You're playing cards like Rift Sealers finds an event, Outskirts Watchtower receives orders from Rift Sealers and then plays the event a second time. It kind of gives you a lot of play here. I have tentatively built a deck list that works with these things, and I'm going to be playing it soon. I don't know, my Thursday, but when it's uploaded, probably a few weeks from now. Which is going to be playing with some of those things, and we have the new Tyler Ascendant sea monster from the last patch notes as well, where she was changed, where you shuffle exactly 20 cards from your banish pile into your deck, take an extra turn. And then whenever she activates, if you have Treacherous Times, I think Treacherous Times doesn't have a requirement, it's just you banish the top 2 cards of your deck, which is a requirement. Then you claim a treasure. So events, when they resolve, go on the banish pile. The faster you play all these events, the quicker you get to 20 cards for Tyler to activate and give you the extra turn. And if your hand advantage or your tableau is built in such a way that you could get to 20 that second time, you could probably have infinite turns. I don't think that's possible. I think you would need like 4 Rift Sealers in play and something that's going to activate your tableau in your construction step as well as your main phase. But I guess also Rampage, so that's 12 just on the 4 Rift Sealers. And then like your Rift Sealers for King's Edict each time and stuff like that. So it's maybe possible. It's a huge payoff, right? But that's the idea. We're trying to build a small tableau. We're trying to give more expansive deck building options and create stuff that, like, if it's already kind of filling a niche, then maybe we need to adjust this, that it solves more problems, or it gives more opportunities, or it creates more cool interactions, giving players like more meat to dig into when it comes to really deck building stuff. Like, how much synergy can I find with all of the things that I need and I'm playing? That's for you to discover, and that is the joy of designing the Cutlass board game. And so if this caught any of your attention, you made it 20 minutes into the video of me talking about designing a TCG, maybe you should go and try and have a look at some of the actual gameplay of the game. I'm going to put a photo stuff on the screen. I've been playing it a whole lot on the channel, just kind of casually with some friends, just kind of running through. Get a bit competitive, design a deck we play and see how it goes. Sometimes we build a good deck, sometimes we build a janky deck, or we just play really horribly or whatever, because we're just not taking it super seriously, we're just playing it for fun, which is kind of the goal, right? We're in that stage where that's fine. But I do think it's worth checking out if you are interested in Cutlass game, because I am very excited about the future of this game and where it's going. So stick around, because we are going to have more gameplay soon. We will have the new update when we're recording stuff on Thursday. We will have some cool stuff to show off, and I'll be able to show off what this deck was intended to be in action. So stick around for that.